In 1960, an 18-year-old Olympic champion walked into a whites-only diner wearing his gold medal. What happened in the next 3 minutes would humiliate him in ways he never imagined possible. But the diner owner made one fatal mistake. He didn't know who was listening. 400 miles north, a phone rang at midnight, and a man whose name made entire neighborhoods fall silent decided that some insults demand an answer written in fire. Louisville, Kentucky. It was Monday, the 7th of September, 1960, approximately 23 minutes past 2 in the afternoon, when 18-year-old Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. emerged from the doorway of the Pan American aircraft, dressed in a light gray suit his mother Odessa had helped him select 3 weeks earlier, wearing a crisp white shirt and a narrow black tie knotted in a perfect Windsor. The September sun struck the gold medal, hanging on his chest, with such force that photographers on the tarmac shielded their eyes from the blinding reflection. He had not removed that medal once since Rome, slept with it, showered with it hanging on a hook within arm's reach. This medal was not jewelry. It was proof that a colored boy from Louisville could defeat the entire world. If you want to find out how this incredible story ends, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss our next video. The crowd below erupted. 300 people packed the observation area at Standiford Field. Signs bobbed above heads, "Welcome home, Cassius," and "Louisville's Golden Boy." His mother Odessa stood in the front row, tears streaming down her cheeks, wearing her best Sunday dress, the blue one with white lace she reserved for Easter and Christmas. His father stood beside her, for once unable to find words, this man who had painted signs for white businesses his whole life, while dreaming of galleries that would never show his work. But not everyone was celebrating. In the back rows, 3 white men in work coveralls watched without applause. One of them spat on the asphalt and muttered to his companion words that would prove prophetic. "Medal or no medal, a nigger stays a nigger." Cassius saw them. For one fraction of a second, his famous smile flickered. Then he pushed the doubt away and waved to the crowd with both hands, the gold catching light with every movement. That flicker of doubt would return. In approximately 3 hours, a white man would throw his Olympic gold into a garbage can while 20 people applauded. In 48 hours, that man's entire world would burn to ashes. But right now, Cassius Clay was still smiling, still believing that this medal changed everything. By 5 o'clock, the celebration had wound down. Cassius found himself restless, hungry for something beyond his mother's cooking. He wanted to be seen. He wanted to walk through the Louisville that had ignored him for 18 years and feel recognition in every glance. He called 3 friends, Ronnie King, Jerome Wilson, and Tyrone Henderson. By 5:30, they pulled up in Tyrone's battered Ford. "Where to?" Tyrone asked. "Walnut Street, Wade's Diner, always packed in the evenings." Ronnie froze. "Cassius, that's a white establishment. They won't serve us." For a moment, Cassius was silent. He knew the risk. Every black man in Louisville knew which doors were closed to them. But knowing and accepting were different things. "Everything's different now, Ronnie. I'm an Olympic champion. I won gold for this country. They can't refuse me." He tapped the medal on his chest. The medal rang with a dull, confident sound. Ronnie said nothing more. The Ford turned west toward Walnut Street. The bell above the door would chime in exactly 11 seconds. And when it did, Cassius Clay's understanding of America would shatter like glass against concrete. The smell hit him first when he stepped inside. Frying bacon, fresh coffee, the grease and sugar perfume of American roadside cooking. 16 white customers occupied the red vinyl booths and chrome-legged stools. every single one of them stopped what they were doing when 4 black teenagers walked in. The silence was immediate and absolute. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Coffee cups hovered in midair. Cassius chose a booth near the window and slid onto the red vinyl seat with the easy grace of an athlete. His friends followed. The gold medal caught the light and threw dancing reflections across the Formica tabletop. Under the table, his right hand had balled into a fist without him realizing it. He noticed and consciously unclenched his fingers. Control. Always control. 30 seconds passed. 60. No waitress approached. Then she appeared. Bleached blonde hair, maybe 40 years old. A pink uniform faded to gray from too many washings. Her name tag read, Betty. She walked to their table with a notepad but did not look at them. She looked through them as if they were furniture. Help you. Flat. Mechanical. Stripped of any pretense of hospitality. Cassius smiled up at her. Yes, ma'am. I'll have a cheeseburger, fries, and a chocolate milkshake. My friend's here. We don't serve niggers. The word dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. Cassius felt something cold move through his chest, but he kept his smile in place. Ma'am, I think there might be some misunderstanding. I'm Cassius Clay. I just won the gold medal for the United States at the Olympic Games in Rome. He lifted the medal slightly. The gold gleamed. Betty's expression did not change by a millimeter. She looked at the medal the way one might look at a particularly large insect. I don't care if you're the Queen of England. We don't serve niggers here, not even ones who jump around like monkeys on a boxing ring. She grabbed the menu from the table and threw it at his feet. The laminated pages slapped against the linoleum like a gunshot. Now get out before I call the manager. Ronnie's hand found Cassius's arm under the table, squeezing once. Let's go. This isn't worth it. But Cassius did not move. Moving would mean accepting. Moving would mean admitting that Rome meant nothing. I'd like to speak to the manager. I'm sure he'll understand. Betty's lips twisted into something that was almost a smile. Oh, honey, you want to speak to Mr. Wade. That can be arranged. She turned and walked toward the kitchen, and in that moment Cassius had no idea that the man now approaching from the back was about to do something that would travel 400 miles north within hours, would reach the ears of a man whose name made entire neighborhoods fall silent, and would bring fire and ruin to this very building before the week was out. Horatio Wade emerged from the kitchen like a man who had been waiting for this moment his entire life, 220 pounds distributed across a frame that had surrendered to decades of his own cooking, small eyes nearly buried in folds of reddened flesh, a white apron stained with ketchup, mustard, and something that looked disturbingly like dried blood. He stopped 3 feet from the booth, close enough to loom. For 5 seconds, neither man spoke. The entire diner held its breath. Then Wade's eyes dropped to the medal. Something flickered in those buried eyes, something that looked almost like hunger. So you're the boy, the boxing nigger. Heard about you on the radio. Cassius began to rise, his hand extended for a handshake, his smile still intact. Yes, sir, Mr. Wade. Cassius Clay, Olympic champion. I was hoping... Wade's hand shot out, not to accept the handshake, to grab Cassius by the lapel. The fabric bunched in that meaty fist. Cassius felt himself pulled forward, off balance, his hip striking the table edge. Salt and pepper shakers toppled. With his other hand, Wade grabbed the ribbon around Cassius's neck. One savage yank. The ribbon snapped. The gold medal was suddenly in Horatio Wade's grip. The diner erupted, not in protest, in applause. 20 people began clapping. Some rose to their feet. The teenagers in Letterman jackets hooted. One elderly woman actually cheered. Cassius stood frozen, his hand still extended for a handshake that would never come. His neck burned where the ribbon had cut into skin before snapping. Wade held the medal up to the light, examining it the way a buyer examines questionable merchandise. He bit down on the edge, testing it with his teeth. Gold, huh? Feels real enough. Then he walked to the counter, slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone could see. Behind the register was a garbage can, metal, dented, filled with coffee grounds, eggshells, cigarette butts, and the remnants of a dozen meals. Wade held the Olympic gold medal over that garbage can. He looked back at Cassius. You want to know where your medal belongs, boy? You want to know what your glory is worth in the real America? He opened his fingers. The medal fell. The clang of gold against metal was the loudest sound Cassius had ever heard. One sharp note that seemed to hang in the air forever. The applause doubled. Someone whistled. The Letterman jackets chanted, USA, USA, in a mocking tone that twisted patriotic syllables into something obscene. Wade crossed his arms over his stained apron. Now get out, and if I ever see your black face around here again, I'll call the sheriff. He's a good friend of mine, member of the same social club, if you know what I mean. Cassius stood absolutely still. His friends had risen, faces masks of controlled terror. Ronnie's hand was on his arm again, pulling, but Cassius's eyes were fixed on the garbage can, on the glint of gold barely visible beneath coffee grounds. Something inside him was calculating, not the calculation of a frightened teenager, the calculation of a boxer who understood when to strike and when to wait. He straightened his twisted lapel, adjusted his tie, looked Horatio Wade directly in those buried eyes. Then he walked to the counter. Wade stepped aside, perhaps involuntarily shocked by the sheer audacity. Cassius reached into the garbage can. His fingers found cold metal beneath warm slime. He pulled the metal free, trailing egg yolk and coffee grounds. He wiped it on his shirt, his beautiful white shirt, now stained with brown and yellow streaks that would never wash out. He hung the broken ribbon around his neck. The metal rested on his chest once more. He did not speak. He did not look back. He pushed through the door, the bell chiming cheerfully as if nothing had happened. Behind him, the laughter resumed, louder, crueler. Someone threw a wadded napkin that bounced off his back. Someone called out something vile. But Cassius Clay walked to Tyrone's Ford, opened the door, sat down, and stared straight ahead at the dashboard. His friends piled in. No one spoke. Tyrone started the engine and pulled away. And as the diner receded in the rearview mirror, Cassius sat in silence with a garbage-stained medal around his neck and felt something fundamental shifting inside his chest. He did not know it yet, but in approximately 400 miles to the north, in a Harlem apartment, a telephone would ring in less than 6 hours. A man named Bumpy Johnson would hear this story for the first time, and everything that happened after would begin in that moment. But right now, there was only a car moving through Louisville twilight, carrying 4 young men away from Walnut Street, and a gold medal that would never feel the same again. The news traveled faster than anyone could have predicted. By 9 o'clock that evening, the story of the Olympic champion and the garbage can had spread through every black barber shop, beauty salon, and pool hall in Louisville. By 10, it had reached Cincinnati. By 11, Cleveland, Detroit, and Chicago were buzzing with outrage. And at exactly 11 minutes before midnight, a telephone rang in a 5th-floor apartment on 147th Street in Harlem, and the story reached the ears of a man who would do something about it. Ellsworth Raymond Johnson answered on the second ring. Everyone from Manhattan to the Bronx knew him as Bumpy. He was 54 years old and for nearly 2 decades his word had been law in Harlem's underworld. But what made Bumpy different from every other crime boss in New York was simple. He had one rule that every person in his organization understood with absolute clarity. Black dignity was not negotiable. The call came from Leroy Williams, his man in Cincinnati. Leroy's voice was trembling when he spoke, not from fear, from rage barely contained. "Boss, you need to hear this. That kid who won the boxing gold in Rome, Cassius Clay from Louisville." Bumpy set down the glass of bourbon he had been nursing. On the nightstand beside him was a framed photograph of his daughter, taken at her 8th birthday party 2 months ago. She was smiling, wearing a paper crown he had made for her with his own hands. I heard of him. 18 years old. Fast hands. What about him? What Leroy told him over the next 90 seconds changed everything. A white diner owner, a medal torn from the boy's neck, gold thrown into garbage with coffee grounds and eggshells, 20 white people applauding like they were watching a circus act. The champion of the United States of America forced to dig his own medal out of the trash while a crowd laughed. And then, the worst part, "Boss, after the kid left, this cracker fished the medal out of the garbage, nailed it to the wall behind his cash register, put up a sign that says, 'Trophy, Louisville, September 7th, 1960, never forget your place.' It's still hanging there, right now, an Olympic gold medal displayed like a hunting trophy." Bumpy listened without interrupting. His face did not change expression, but his wife Mamie, watching from the bedroom doorway, saw something she had only witnessed a handful of times in their 30 years together. The temperature behind her husband's eyes dropped to absolute zero. When Leroy finished, there was silence on the line for 15 seconds. Bumpy's hand moved to the photograph of his daughter. His fingers touched the glass, lightly, almost tenderly. Then he spoke. His voice was so quiet that Leroy had to press the receiver hard against his ear to hear. The owner's name, the address of the establishment, everything about him. "You have 1 hour." He paused. "And Leroy, this boy, the boxer. He doesn't know it yet, but tonight all of Harlem stands behind him. Start making calls. We're going to Louisville." He hung up the phone and sat motionless in his chair. Outside the window, the lights of Harlem glittered like scattered diamonds against the darkness. Down there were his people, his streets, his responsibility. And somewhere in Louisville, a white man was probably sleeping peacefully, believing he had won, believing he had put a black boy in his place, believing there would be no consequences for throwing Olympic gold into garbage. Bumpy reached for his telephone again. He had calls to make, 48 hours. That was how long Horatio Wade's diner had left to exist. The countdown had begun. By 3:17 in the morning, 15 men had gathered in the back room of Macy's Bar on Lenox Avenue. Smoke hung thick in the air. A single photograph lay on the table. Horatio Wade standing in front of his diner, arms crossed, smiling the smile of a man who believed himself untouchable. Bumpy stood at the head of the table, his immaculate gray suit a stark contrast to the dim, grimy room. He had not slept. He would not sleep until this was done. Listen carefully. I will not repeat myself. He tapped the photograph. This man decided he could humiliate one of ours, not just anyone. An 18-year-old boy who won Olympic gold for the United States of America. He tore the medal from the boy's neck, threw it in the trash, made him dig it out while 20 white people applauded. Bumpy's voice dropped. And then he nailed that medal to his wall, like a hunting trophy. A sign beneath it says, "Never forget your place." That medal is still hanging there, right now, a symbol of everything they think of us. He straightened to his full height. If we let this stand, we tell every white man in America that he can do the same, that he can humiliate our children with no consequences. That black dignity has no defenders. His eyes swept the room. We are the defenders. A voice came from the back. An older man, respected, one of Bumpy's original crew from the 30s. Boss, this could bring trouble. The Italians have interests in Kentucky. Luciano's people won't like us operating on their territory without permission. Silence. Bumpy did not blink. Then let Luciano watch. Let him see what happens when someone disrespects our people. If he has a problem with that, he knows where to find me. No one else spoke. Bumpy produced a sheet of paper, block letters carefully written. The message we leave will say exactly what needs to be said, nothing more, nothing less. He read aloud. This is for the Olympic champion of America, for the medal in the garbage can, for every black man, woman, and child who has ever been told their achievements mean nothing. No one will treat our people like trash. No one, ever. You wanted a trophy? Here is your trophy, ashes and memory. He folded the paper and placed it in a fireproof metal box. 3 teams, 48 hours, no traces, no witnesses, nothing left but smoke, and a lesson this country will never forget. By 5 in the morning, the first team was heading for Penn Station, and Horatio Wade, who at that moment was unlocking the front door of his diner to begin another day, had no idea that his world was measured in hours now. The first team arrived in Louisville at 14 minutes past 2 in the afternoon on September 8th. 3 men in unremarkable suits, carrying unremarkable suitcases, stepped off the train at Union Station and disappeared into the crowd like smoke dissolving into air. Within an hour, one of them was sitting on a park bench across from Wade's diner, a newspaper open in his lap, his eyes recording everything. But the real breakthrough came from a different source. His name was Ernest White, 22 years old, employed as a dishwasher at Wade's diner for 3 years. Invisible to the white customers and nearly invisible to his employer, who communicated with him through shouted orders and occasional insults. One of Bumpy's men found Ernest on his break behind the diner, smoking a cigarette in the alley, his apron stained with the residue of 1,000 meals he would never be allowed to eat in the dining room. The conversation was brief. Careful. I was there, Ernest said, his voice barely above a whisper. Not from fear, from something else entirely. I saw the whole thing. I was behind the counter when that boy came in. The Olympic kid. I recognized him from the papers. He was wearing his medal, smiling like he'd won the whole world. He took a long drag on his cigarette. Then Mr. Wade came out, and I watched him tear that medal right off the boy's neck. I watched him throw it in the garbage. I heard everyone clapping. His voice cracked. And I just stood there. Couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Just stood there like a coward while they humiliated that boy. He dropped the cigarette, ground it under his heel. You know what Wade did after? He fished the medal out, held it up for everyone to see, said it was his new good luck charm, said it would remind everyone what happens to coloreds who forget their place. Then he nailed it to the wall. It's still there, right behind the register. Every time I wash a dish, I see it. The man from Harlem listened without expression. When Ernest finished, he asked one question. If someone wanted to get into this diner after hours, how would they do it? Something passed between them, an understanding that required no words. Back door, Ernest said. Wade never checks it properly. The wood's rotted around the frame. A strong push would open it, and there's a storage room in back. That's where he keeps the generator fuel, 4 5-gallon cans of gasoline. The man from Harlem nodded. He produced a roll of bills. $500, more than Ernest made in 3 months. You were never here. We never spoke. Tomorrow night, don't come to work. Tell Wade you're sick. Stay home. Stay far away from this place." Ernest took the money with steady hands. He understood everything. "One more thing," the man added. "That medal on the wall. After tomorrow night, it won't be there anymore. It's going back where it belongs." For the first time, Ernest smiled. A small, tight smile that held years of accumulated rage. Make it burn. Make it burn so bright they can see it all the way to Washington. Then he turned and walked back into the diner to finish his shift, leaving the man alone in the alley with the smell of garbage and the distant sound of white laughter filtering through the kitchen window. 24 hours remained. The second team arrived in Louisville on the evening of September 9th. 4 men traveling separately on different trains, converging at the colored boarding house as the sun descended toward the horizon. They carried nothing suspicious. Their suitcases contained only clothes and toiletries. The materials they needed would be acquired locally, through channels established decades ago. Louisville's black community had received word through the Baptist Church network. Something was coming, something important. Questions were not asked. Assistance was offered. By nightfall, the team had everything they needed: work clothes, gloves, a crowbar, rags, and confirmation that Ernest White had called in sick to his shift. At 9 o'clock, they received word from the surveillance team. Wade had followed his usual routine with mechanical precision. Arrived at 5:45, took his lunch at 2. Right now, at 9:07, he was behind the counter serving the evening's final customers, a group of white teenagers making a mess of their table and laughing too loudly. The medal was still on the wall, confirmed twice. At 10:15, the last customers left. At 10:17, Wade emerged from the front door, locked it behind him, and began his 8-block walk home. The surveillance man followed at a distance, watching until the diner owner disappeared into his house on Maple Street. Lights went on. 20 minutes later, they went off. Horatio Wade was asleep. He would not sleep peacefully for much longer. At 2:47 in the morning on September 10th, 4 shadows moved through the alley behind Wade's diner. The night was moonless, clouds obscuring the stars, darkness so complete that a man could not see his own hand in front of his face. Perfect conditions. Ernest had been true to his word. The back door's bolt was loose, the wood frame soft with rot. One controlled push, and the door swung inward without a sound. The smell hit them immediately. Stale grease, old coffee, the staleness of a space closed for hours. They moved through the kitchen in absolute silence, soft-soled shoes making no noise on linoleum. One man remained at the back door, watching the alley. A second stayed at the front, hidden in shadows, watching the street. 2 advanced into the main dining area. The cash register hulked in the darkness like a sleeping animal, and there, on the wall behind it, a faint gleam of gold caught the minimal light filtering through front windows. The lead man approached the medal. He stood before it for a moment, reading the handwritten sign beneath. Trophy, Louisville, September 7th, 1960. Never forget your place. His fingers touched the cold metal. Olympic gold, covered in 3 days of cigarette smoke and grease. He removed it carefully, almost reverently, placed it in his pocket. Then he tore down the sign and crumpled it in his fist. The storage room door opened easily. 4 5-gallon cans of gasoline sat exactly where Ernest had said. 20 gallons of fuel, more than enough. They worked quickly, methodically. Gasoline soaked into wooden floors behind the counter, splashed across tables and booths, ran down walls and pooled in corners. The smell became overwhelming, burning nostrils, making eyes water. When the last can was empty, one man produced the fireproof metal box containing Bumpy Johnson's message. He added the crumpled sign to it before sealing. Place the box near the front door, where investigators would find it. Then they moved to the back exit. The four men gathered in the alley, invisible in darkness. One struck a single match, watched it flare to life. He tossed it through the open doorway. For one heartbeat, nothing. Then blue flame, racing across the floor in perfect silence. Blue became orange, became yellow, became white. Windows began to glow from within. Smoke poured through every crack and seam. By 3:17, exactly 48 hours after Bumpy Johnson received the midnight phone call, Wade's diner was fully engulfed. The four men were already gone, vanished into night like they had never existed. 8 blocks away, Horatio Wade woke to fire sirens. He ran to his front porch in pajamas, saw the orange glow on the northeastern horizon, understood immediately. He ran, bare feet slapping pavement, threadbare pajamas flapping, 8 blocks through sleeping streets. He arrived just as the roof collapsed inward with a sound like the world ending. Wade fell to his knees on the sidewalk. He watched his life's work burn. And when tears came, they were not tears of grief alone. They were something else, the first stirring of understanding that actions have consequences, that some insults carry prices too high to pay. The fire burned until dawn. By 11 o'clock that morning, Detective Robert Mackenzie had been standing in the ruins for nearly 3 hours, and he had never felt more frustrated in 23 years on the Louisville police force. The fire marshal had already confirmed what Mackenzie's nose told him on arrival: gasoline, lots of it. Arson, deliberate and professional, executed by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The building was a total loss. Nothing remained but charred timbers, blackened bricks, and a foundation filled with ash. The cash register had partially melted into twisted sculpture. The counter where customers had eaten burgers was now a ridge of carbonite, everything reduced to cinders. But the most puzzling element was not what fire had destroyed. It was what fire had spared. Near the front entrance, investigators found a fireproof metal box. Inside was a single sheet of paper, message written in careful block letters. This is for the Olympic champion of America, for the medal in the garbage can, for every black man, woman, and child who has ever been told their achievements mean nothing. No one will treat our people like trash. No one, ever. You wanted a trophy? Here is your trophy, ashes and memory. Beneath the note was a crumpled piece of paper. When straightened, it revealed a handwritten sign: Trophy, Louisville, September 7th, 1960. Never forget your place. Mackenzie interviewed Horatio Wade 3 times. The diner owner sat on a folding chair across the street, wrapped in a blanket despite September warmth, staring at ruins with empty eyes. He told the detective about the incident 3 days earlier, the black boxer with the Olympic medal, throwing the medal in garbage, nailing it to the wall as trophy. He told the story with a mixture of defiance and dawning horror. I didn't think anyone would care, Wade mumbled. He was just a colored boy. Who was going to do anything about it? Mackenzie began interviewing witnesses from surrounding neighborhoods. 73 people over the next 2 days. Black residents who might have seen something, heard something, known something. Every single one said the same thing. I was sleeping. Didn't hear nothing. Didn't see nothing. Don't know nothing about no fire. Their faces were blank, their voices flat. Their eyes revealed nothing. But Mackenzie, who had been a detective long enough to read what people did not say, saw something else in those 73 faces: satisfaction, vindication, the quiet, fierce joy of people who had witnessed justice, not legal justice, but something older, delivered to a man who had escaped consequences his entire life. On the third day, Ernest White walked past the ruins on his way to a new job across town. He did not stop, did not stare, just walked past with his hands in his pockets and the faintest smile on his face. By September 12th, Mackenzie filed his report. Official cause: arson by unknown perpetrators. Case status: suspended pending new evidence. Translation: this case would gather dust until everyone involved was long dead, and Horatio Wade, who had lost everything he owned, who would never rebuild, who would spend remaining days working menial jobs and drinking himself to sleep, learned a lesson that no amount of money could have taught him. Some insults have prices, very high prices. But while detectives filed reports that would lead nowhere, while Wade sat staring at ashes that had been his life, something else was happening on a bridge over the Ohio River, and it had been happening since the exact moment when the diner caught fire 3 miles to the south, 4:17 in the morning on September 10th. The exact moment when Wade's diner was burning to the ground 3 miles to the south, Cassius Clay stood alone on the 2nd Street Bridge, his hands gripping the iron railing, staring down at black water below. He did not know about the fire, would not learn about it until later that day, when news spread through Louisville's black community like a whispered prayer. Right now, he knew only one thing. The weight of the metal around his neck felt different than it had 5 days ago. He had cleaned it, scrubbed away the coffee grounds and egg yolk with soap and water, polished it with a soft cloth until gold gleamed as brightly as it had in Rome. But no amount of cleaning could remove what had happened. The metal was marked now, not visibly, something worse, something that lived in memory and replayed every time he touched the cold metal. The laughter, the applause, the crash of gold against garbage, Wade's face twisted with satisfaction, the sign on the wall, "Never forget your place." Cassius had not slept since returning from the diner, had lain in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene, had gotten up twice to look at the medal hanging on his dresser mirror. Both times, something rose in his throat that was not quite nausea and not quite rage. Now he stood on the bridge, alone in darkness, holding the medal in his hand. He had won this medal by defeating the best boxers in the world, had sacrificed everything for this medal: his mother's savings, spent on equipment and travel, his father's hopes, crystallized in this single piece of gold. And what had it earned him? A garbage can, laughter, a sign proclaiming him less than human. This country had given him the medal and then shown him his place. The medal was a lie, a beautiful golden lie about a nation that did not exist. Not for him, not for anyone who looked like him. He held the medal up, letting it catch faint light from street lamps behind him. The profile of the goddess Nike, the 5 Olympic rings, words that had meant everything 1 week ago and meant nothing now. He looked at the medal. He looked at the water. He threw. The medal arced through darkness, spinning, catching light one final time, before disappearing into void. 1 second, 2 seconds, a distant splash, almost too quiet to hear. Ripples spreading across water he could not see. His hands were empty. For a long moment he stood motionless, staring at the spot where the medal had vanished. The Ohio River flowed on, indifferent, carrying his gold toward the Mississippi and eventually the Gulf of Mexico, carrying away everything he had believed about his country, his future, his place in the world. Then something unexpected happened. He felt lighter, not happy, not at peace, but lighter, as if a physical weight had been removed from his shoulders. The medal was gone, and with it, the lie it represented. He was no longer Cassius Clay, Olympic champion, grateful recipient of America's recognition. He was just Cassius Clay, 18 years old, black, standing on a bridge in the middle of the night, finally understanding the truth about the world he lived in. And with that understanding came something else, something that felt like the first stirring of a new kind of strength. If this country would not accept him with a medal, then he would make them accept him without one. If their recognition meant garbage cans and laughter, then he did not need their recognition. He would build something else, something that belonged to him alone, something they could never throw away or nail to a wall. He would become so great, so undeniable, so impossible to ignore that they would have no choice but to acknowledge him as human, not because of what their country gave him, because of what he made himself. The first light of dawn was beginning to touch the eastern horizon when Cassius Clay turned away from the railing and walked back toward Louisville. He did not know that the diner was burning. He did not know that someone had avenged him. He did not know that in 1 week he would receive an invitation to visit Harlem, to meet a man named Bumpy Johnson, to hear truths about power and dignity that would shape him for the rest of his life. All he knew was that he was empty-handed, and somehow, impossibly, more determined than ever. The bridge stretched behind him. The river flowed beneath, and somewhere in the depths a gold medal sank slowly toward the mud. But the man who had won that medal was just beginning to rise. 1 week later, a package arrived at the Clay family home on Grand Avenue. No return address. Inside was a velvet box containing an Olympic gold medal, polished to a perfect shine, with a new ribbon replacing the one that had been torn. Beneath it, a handwritten note on plain paper. Harlem stands with its champions. This belongs to you. What you do with it is your choice. But know this, you are not alone. You were never alone. And the man who tried to take your dignity paid a price he will never forget. Welcome to the family. BJ. Cassius held the medal in his hands for a long time. Then he placed it in a drawer. He would not wear it again for many years, but he would keep it. A reminder, not of Rome, not of victory. A reminder of the night he learned who his true family was, and of the fire that taught America a lesson it would never forget.